are thousands and thousands of high-rise buildings around the world. But if you look at a list of the tallest 1,000, Richard, how many do you think are in Europe?
Actually, I don't think there are that many in Europe. Okay, I'll say 20.
20? I thought it was much more. Richard, it's only 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So for this week's podcast on English.com, we ask, why is that? Where are the high-rise buildings? So, Richard, if we go back into the past, where did they all start?
Well, I think the word skyscraper, I think it didn't that originate in America, in New York?
No, Chicago.
Oh, right, okay.
And where are they all now?
I think they're all in Asia. You keep hearing about the tallest building in the world in Asia, so I think that's where they are.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking, when you say Asia, we're talking China.
The Middle East.
The Middle East. Okay, so the tallest building is still
Burj
Khalifa, yeah, so that's 828 metres. That's still the highest. Okay, so we stay in Europe, Richard. Let's look at the top 10 in Europe. Now, interesting, 8 of those are in the same country.
It's got to be London, surely.
No!
Wow, okay. Where's that?
Russia.
Ah.
And 7 of them are in the same city.
So that's Moscow.
Right, and the tallest is actually in St. Petersburg.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The next one is the other 2 are the UK and Poland.
Yes. Well, I certainly know one of the tallest is the Shard, of course. We did a podcast on it, didn't we, in London?
Yeah, you see, that's 309 metres. And at the time, it was quite a big thing, but it's small.
Well, it's not small, but maybe in comparison to some of the other buildings.
So why do you think that is, Richard?
Well, I think European cities are very old, aren't they? So they're cramped. There's small roads. I think it's quite difficult to build a tall building in Europe.
Yeah, I think the key thing here is old, Richard. And I think Europe is much more about protecting the past, whereas the States or Asia is all about the future.
Yes, in Europe it's tradition, isn't it, and heritage.
Yeah, because even the buildings that got knocked down during the Second World War, they didn't clear the way and put in a modern building. You take St. Pancras railway station, they rebuilt it in the old style.
Like they're doing with Notre Dame Cathedral.
Exactly. Now, in Europe, there are some very, very strict building regulations, all about protecting the cultural heritage. In Italy, Richard, in central Rome, no building can be taller than...
The Colosseum, maybe? That's quite tall in itself.
St. Peter's Basilica.
Oh, yes.
Which is only 136 metres. In Greece, in Athens, no building can block the view of...
The Parthenon.
Exactly, which is why the maximum height is 12 stories.
Wow.
In Paris, they decided in 1973 that the tallest building in central Paris will be 37 metres.
Wow.
London, Richard.
That's changed recently. Lots of skyscrapers now.
But actually, it could be many more. Did you know that there are protected views in London?
St. Paul's Cathedral.
There are 8 places in London where you have to be able to see St. Paul's Cathedral. And you're not allowed to put any building in front of it to block it.
Wow. Well, I think that's a good thing. Very good thing. New skyscrapers, I'm not keen. They're all a bit boring, I think. Glass, steel, not for me. Many people think because we're living in the countryside that our life is all peace and quiet. But that is certainly not the case.
Yeah, so for this week's podcast on English.com, we're talking about sound.
Or rather noise.
Yeah, okay, so what's the difference?
Well, I suppose sound is anything and everything we can hear, but noise is a sound we don't like, an unpleasant sound.
Yeah, okay, so we're used to this. We're used to sitting down to dinner, aren't we? Only for the neighbour to start cutting the grass, for example.
Big noise.
But in France, Richard, city folk who have moved to the countryside hate the noise so much that they have actually taken farmers to court.
That's ridiculous. What are they complaining about?
So actually, they were complaining because they're no longer allowed to take their issues to the courts, right? But listen to these kinds of complaints. The sounds of cows mooing.
Oh, I like that sound.
Not only that, ducks quacking, geese honking, plus there have been tourists complaining about the sound of the cicadas.
I suppose cicadas are quite loud, aren't they?
They're the loudest insect in the world.
Oh, okay.
Now, there's also the story of an old woman whose new neighbours complained about her frogs croaking because they couldn't sleep at night. 2 policemen turned up and said there had been a complaint from the neighbours because the croaking was so loud and they couldn't sleep.
So they arrested the frogs, did they?
I don't know. I can't. Good luck with trying to catch those. And then there's a couple who took a woman to court because of her cockerel crowing at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Oh dear. I suppose also a lot of these noises seem much louder at night when everything else is so quiet. But now you're saying they can't complain.
No, they can't. I mean, the government were just fed up with the courts being clogged up by, complaints of the sound of mooing or church bells ringing, so they put a stop to it.
Well, I can imagine going and speaking to the neighbour. Although how can they stop a cow from mooing is beyond me. But to take the trouble to go to court about this seems absolutely ridiculous.
I know.
And surely, after a while, you get used to it. I remember when I lived in Cairo, that the sound at dawn of the muezzin calling the people to prayer. It woke me for the first couple of days, and then I simply got used to it.
I know, exactly. And it's expensive too. I don't think any of the cases were successful.
Yes, well, we may not like the sound of the tractors or the sound of our neighbours cutting the grass, but the cicadas singing, for us, it's the sound of summer.